Hello and welcome back to this video where we are going to make the other side of the quilted bauble. When I was editing the one that I did yesterday to show you the first side, I realised that I actually had the bauble here for a little while. So when you see that video, and I've posted it a bit later on, I've cut some bits out. And today, to help me, I put my ruler there so I mustn't go below that, and hopefully everything will stay in frame. So I've already got to start today by putting my pins into the fabric, and today I'm actually going to put the pins through the middle instead of folding and then putting the pin in, and then I can show you the difference between the two sides. So when you get on to doing the second side, you've got your lines drawn already, and I've corrected those lines. One of the things you can do to make sure that you've got the opposite cross in the right place, this should be the bottom of your bauble, and if you lay it flat on the table, it should end up with your cross being at the top, which mine more or less does. If it ends up that that cross where the two lines are is slightly off because your bauble is resting on that flat bit at the bottom, then you need to redraw that line just to make sure you get them in the right place. Because this is a straightforward pattern, it's a bit easier than some of the more complicated ones. So what you have to do is find on the first side where you've got the slight gaps in the fabric and follow that line round, and that's where we're going to put the first square. So I'm going to pin it in, and fold it down, and this bit from here on in is the same as we did on the other side. I just want you to see the difference with what happens with the pins when you put it on the inside of the fabric. So here you see, you can't actually see the pin. If you are a bit rough with your fabrics and you pull too much, then sometimes the fabric actually pops out from the pin because you make a little hole in the fabric. That's not what we want to do. So once we've got the first side on, we do the opposite side. And I was asked why we don't do the side next to it, and I don't actually know. I know when I learnt this from watching YouTube videos myself, the main one being Ornament Girls, who are, they have a fantastic series of videos showing you all sorts of different pattern folds and everything. But I think it's so that you can get your right angles correct. There is a slight danger if you just go edge to edge that you end up veering off to the side, I think. And when you get to here, line this edge up across that straight line there, and then fold down. Exactly the same as we were doing when we were doing the first side. Again, I don't always pin these pins straight in because I do like to make sure that that line is going to match up with the opposite side. That one is because it was one I drew. That one is. It's always a relief when it lines up. If it doesn't line up, it's actually fine because all it means is you just need to unpin and then repin it. It doesn't take more than a couple of minutes. But if you do the checking as you go along, it makes everything that much easier and more accurate. So I'm wondering how many of you have actually had a go at making any of these baubles yet. I do appreciate the comments that people give me underneath the videos, because that helps me to improve what I'm doing with my videos. Let me just check that's going to match. Yep, that'll do. So I'm happy with that. Again, I just check my gaps, happy that they're not too big. So I press all those in and then pin. So there we have the centre of the second side down. And if I hold it up close, you can see the difference between that side and that side. On this side we can see the pin, but on this side the pins are hidden. So you might remember in the last video I showed you my quick hack with the measuring, and I've got my square of fabric. I would usually keep all the bits of fabric for a bauble together, together with the quick hack square. So now I don't have to fuss about going, oh, where's my tape measure, where's my tape measure, where's my ruler, and that kind of thing. I can just use this. Now, on the second layer, we need to find which of the squares are underneath. So this one is underneath, and this was on top. So we follow the one that's underneath, and this is where we're going to put the first of our second layer squares. So again, we measure from the centre, put the pin in, and fold. And again, I like to make sure that the line is going to meet up with the one on the opposite side. As you work your way further down the bauble, then you will notice you're pushing through more layers of fabric and it will get more tricky. Now you might realise I'm not quite accurate on this one, so I am just going to move it slightly. Like that. If you are somebody who likes precision, like 100% precision, then this can get you a little bit frustrated. And like I said in the other video, on the first couple I made, I was so precise. But then, once they're made up, and you've got the belly band on, and you've got the ribbon at the top, and they're hanging either on the Christmas tree or somewhere else, then people really don't notice the little bits of millimetre inaccuracies. Oh, bent pin. I haven't actually thought of anything to do yet with all my bent pins, and life's too short to straighten them out. So there's the first four, all nicely placed in. Let's do the next four. And for this one, if you remember in Correctsu, we do the same measurement. So there we have the next layer of squares all set in, and now we just do the pinning again. Remember to make sure that your pins are down in the corners so that they're not going to show. When you do the second layer, it's not too bad because you know that they're covering the ones underneath, but when you get further down your bauble, it becomes more important. So there we have the second layer on the second side. There's the first layer and there's the second layer. And if I hold it up next to it, you'll probably see that the bauble has changed shape slightly because of the layers of fabric that you're adding. Now we go on to add the third layer, and you'll notice I've moved my pins over that side. I don't know why I kept reaching over. Very inefficient. So with the next layer, again, you just check which one is underneath, or if you've done a different pattern, you check what's gone on this side and you repeat it on this side. So the ones that are going underneath are here, so I'm going to start on this one. And this is where this piece of cheat fabric comes into play, because rather again than reaching for my tape measure on my ruler, I've got it measured out so I can get going much more quickly. Make sure that this central line is going to meet up with the one underneath. If it doesn't exactly meet up, again, it really doesn't matter, because when you put the belly band on, you see on this one, you can hide whatever's going on here. So these ones actually do match up quite well. I think because it was squares and stripes, I was a bit more fussy with that one. But with some others, there's some inaccuracies there, and that's okay. So I'm going to carry on with this and speed it up because you don't need to watch me do this again. So there we have the third layer on the bauble, and I'll just do a quick check. Those lines are matching up pretty well actually. That's a little bit out, but by the time you get another square going on there and another one on there, you can make them match up. But there's nothing untoward about that. So you can see we've got quite a big gap in the middle here, and you can, if you wish, have a big belly band. However, for this one, I would tend to put another layer of squares just to narrow this difference. So I'm going to take a little break while I decide what fabric I want to put in here, and then I will come back and show you once I've done it. The process of putting on the fourth layer is exactly the same as the other layers, so there's no difference. What I might decide to do is, as I've done on this one, when I do the fourth layer, I might decide to do them in that kind of spiral shape, just to give it a bit more interest to the actual bauble. I do like to vary up how the different things look. And you might remember me showing you this one in the last video. This one I did get away with 3 layers for, and you can see how wide that belly band was, because you've got to make sure that you cover up all these raw edges and pins. And you can see on this one, the gap is just too big. So I will be back once I've decided what I'm going to do about the next layer. So I'm still trying to decide which fabric I want for my 3rd layer, and if I'm unsure, then what I will do is just take a bit of a square of the ones that I am interested in. I haven't measured in this because this is just a test, just to see what it's going to look like. This blue is slightly more of a teal kind of blue than the other one. So this will just be a quick test to see whether I want it to look like that. Doesn't really match in with the purplies in there, so that's a no. Lovely soft fabric, this one again, but not for this project. I did try the stripy, and I tried it that way, but I didn't like the way that the stripes lined up, so that was a no. And even trying it the other way, I didn't like that either. So I am going to go back to using this one, because I decided this one was too garish in comparison. One of the things when making these is to remember that everybody does see colours slightly differently, so what you see is not necessarily what somebody else sees. Just something to bear in mind. And some people like clashing colours and some people like matchy colours, so if you're making one for somebody else, it's good to know more about them before you make it. So another way that you can decide where your measurements are going to be is to line up with the points that you've already got. So you can fold your fabric, see where those points are, measure that distance, and then use that as your guide. The issue that I found with doing that is if you've got an inaccuracy up here, then that's going to get exaggerated as you go down. So I really do like to just keep measuring, either using my ruler, my tape, or my cheat piece of fabric. I'm going to use this, and I'm going to make it I'm going to make it that one. So I've got the first lot of squares pinned on the 4th layer on one side, and I'm just going to show you how I would do the one where I just fold under one side, so they're all going the same way. So that one's going under, so this one is going over. And when you come to be doing these pins in the middle, try and keep them as close to the middle as you can. And the reason for that is when we do the belly band, we will end up cutting some of these pieces of fabric just to reduce the bulk underneath the belly band in the middle. And sometimes you may have to move these pins. So try to keep them in as much of a line along the middle bit as you can. And remember to be checking for any pins being visible in these bits. The other thing that sometimes happens, I've just realised, is had I taken this point further down, so pinned it in further down here, when I was crossing these bits, I might end up with some raw edge showing, and we definitely don't want to do that. So again, it's just worth checking all of your measurements before you pin them all in like I just did. Sorry guys, I keep hitting you, I do apologise. So there's that layer, and you can see how that looks different to the ones above it. Quite effective, I think. So I'm going to go and pin all the other ones in and then show you how I might match up what's going on in the middle of the bauble. So I'll see you in a few minutes. So when it gets to the final layer on the second side, we've got the first side there, you will notice that it's very bulky around the middle. And you do ideally want these lines to match up with these folds. Pretty good going there, I think. Now, we are going to end up with some bits that we're going to trim off, and I will show you the way that I kind of manage this once I've pinned all of this layer. Now with the pins here, I am going to try and keep them more or less in line, but a bit above the pins that I did on the first side, because I want the bit with pins in the middle to be as narrow as I can get it. That way you've got more chance of hiding your pins with the belly band. I hope this is all making sense. Makes sense to me. So, back in a mo. So now I've got all those 4th layers done on the second side, we need to make a decision. Are we going to fold that way? And I will show you kind of the effect that gives. Or are we going to fold the opposite way? And again, it's something that is totally up to you. You just get a slightly different shape in the middle. And so that I can show you the difference, how it will look on the ball, I'll do 4 going this way. And then on the opposite side, I'll do the other 4 going the other way. And then I'll decide what's going to look best. So 1, 2. This is going to get tough now because we're going through more layers of fabric. One, 2, 3, 4. And then, so on that side, it's been going under that way. So on the other 4, I'm going to put it the other way around. And even as I'm demonstrating this to you, I'm realising that if I want to have 3 going one way and then that one and 3 going the other way, I can do that. And that's one of the nice things about this. Once you know the basic method, you can change up the patterns to suit whatever you want. And sometimes the patterns evolve as you're actually making the bauble, because you see that different things are going to work better than other things. So yeah, that needs to go over that way. So I need to remember that's one way and that's the other way. Now without a belly band on, it's probably not going to notice as much. So I'm just going to get a piece of ribbon to put around there so you can see the difference. Back in a mo. So this is kind of turning into a gender reveal type bauble, I'm just realising, with all the blue and pink. So I've got some ribbon. I'm going to go with the blue because we've got enough pink on there. And this is where you realise that sometimes you're doing it slightly different. So that's one set of baubles, sorry, not baubles, folds. And then this is the other side. So in fact, because of the width of this ribbon, it has not made any difference which way I folded that. If I was using a thinner ribbon, then we would see more of a difference. And I'm not sure if I can do that with just folding this in half. If we were using a thinner ribbon like this, then we would be, get that back on there, we would be trimming away some of this fabric. And you would be able to see some of these overlaps here. So you can see the difference between those overlaps and those overlaps. They just go the opposite direction. It's totally up to you what you do. So I am just going to change this so that these are all going the same way. Just because I will feel happier that way. Because I'm going to use that thick blue ribbon, it really isn't going to matter that much. So that one's under. And I have been known to do this with a bauble, change my mind once I've got something done. Just because I like experimenting, and that's how I've discovered some of the different patterns and effects that I've got with some of the baubles that I've already made. So I think this should be the last one that we're having to take out and repin. Like that. There we go. So if you have still got some of the fabric, I do tend to cut it all up into squares, and if I've got extra kind of little bits at the end, I keep all that in a roll, and then that way I can use some of that as the belly bands. Although you've seen my ribbon stash in a previous video, so you know I've got plenty of ribbon. But you can use these fabrics to put around the middle. I think I did it with this one. And this one. So this spotty pink is the same spotty pink that's in there. So having got this, I know that if I put this ribbon around the middle, I'm going to have some raw edges showing. So I just need to get my scissors and do a little bit of trimming around here, just to reduce the bulk that's going to be under the ribbon. Snip, snip. So when you're doing this bit, please be very careful not to cut the bits underneath. I do leave it like sitting on top of the sellotape, just so it's not bubbling around too much. And I don't cut too near to the pins. And you'll see that in the previous little clip that I did check the coverage with the ribbon before I started cutting. And you don't need to cut all of it off, but just enough to get rid of some of this bulk and some of the technically known sticky outy bits, because we don't want sticky outy bits. And I think I mentioned it earlier, this particular material that is in the middle here is quite silky and does fray quite easily, so not always the best one to use for the middle band, not the middle band, for the last layer. So I'm fairly happy that I have trimmed that quite well. So now on to the ribbon. For this particular one, I am just going to use standard satin ribbon. And when you're putting it down, you can decide whether you're going to have it the unshiny side or the shiny side. I quite like this effect. You can also decide whether you want it to be single layer or double layer. Double layer sometimes shifts, so you get that effect, which you don't want, but it does cover up the pins underneath a little bit better than single layer. So to do this, you just measure around the bauble. I might do cut off more than I need. You can, if you want, singe the edges. I don't tend to do that. And then when it comes to, get rid of that little bit, when it comes to pinning this down, I find a place where there's the lines. I go a little bit beyond it, like that. And I will put 2 pins. Just realised I haven't lined that up correctly, because what you want is to have roughly the same amount on this side and this side. And again, you can always trim the ribbon once you've got it mostly in place. So I'm going to put a couple of pins in there, like that. And then you do need to pull it quite tight. And that's why I say the bits underneath, the lumps and bumps will show. But you can see here I've got some folded down bits and none there, so I just adjust the positioning as I go. And again, it's not going to be 100% accurate, but I do like to get it as accurate as I can. And one of the things that you can probably see there is that with this shiny ribbon, it does have a tendency to rip if you pull it too tight. So that's why the cross grain ribbon, a slightly ridged ribbon, is a little bit better for this. So I'm going to cut that bit off. And then I do need to make sure I cover that little bit of rippage. So I am going to just push those down further. And then you can either cut this into a pointed bit, which I've just done, so that you don't get any raw edges on the outside, or you can fold it, whichever you prefer. And with this end, ideally we want the fold to nearly line up or to exactly line up with one of the lines. And the reason for that is that that is going to be where we put our hanging ribbon, if you're going to have a hanging ribbon. And then I'll just fiddle around a bit with it. But there we have the finished bauble, and all we need now is the ribbon to hang it with and to decide if we're putting any extra little bits and pieces on it. So, thank you for watching.